the literature. This was published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology in 2004. That's a long time ago. They looked at 22 different cancers and whether or not chemotherapy was an effective treatment for those cancers. The results: chemotherapy was effective 2.3% of the time. The conclusion was, it is now clear that cytotoxic chemotherapy only makes a minor contribution to cancer survival. To justify the continued funding and availability of drugs used in cytotoxic chemotherapy, a rigorous evaluation of the cost effectiveness and impact on the quality of life is urgently required.
The mutations are accumulating in the cancer, different from every other cell in the tumor. So, but according to the somatic mutation theory, we'll try to target some of those mutations in the tumor cell with the hope of reducing, and you often don't find complete cures from targeting mutations, mainly because you have other cells in there that may not have those mutations, and therefore they bypass the targeting. And at the same time, now we're realizing that many of these driver mutations, which are different passenger mutations, were the mutations that were thought to be the ones responsible for triggering the dysregulated cell growth. Now, when you try to target driver mutations, new information says and shows clearly from numerous studies that normal cells in our body and our tissues have these same driver mutations that are not associated with dysregulated cell growth. So when you use an immunotherapy or targeted approach to managing cancer, yes, you may slaughter a large number of the tumor cells, but then you have promiscuity and you start destroying your liver and kidneys and some other organs that also may have that same epitope from the mutation. And therefore, it's no longer what we consider a precise targeting. It's an imprecise targeting.
Well, initially it was quite bleak, and I was given a very poor prognosis of just likely a couple of years, 2 to 5 years. And so, I've had a very negative oncologist who just wanted me to pursue this approach of having almost, initially chemoradiation and then almost endless cycles of temozolomide, which is the standard of care for a high-grade glioma. You have this 6.5 weeks of chemoradiation, and then you have monthly cycles of temozolomide. And I started to have that, but then towards the end, I thought, towards the end of that initial starting point, I decided to abandon it, because I didn't realize until I'd thought about it that because my tumor was not sensitive, or classed as not sensitive because of these molecular characteristics that we identified through the histopathology, I realized that I was on an unofficial, it was an official clinical trial that I wasn't really aware I was part of, to see. Essentially, I was the control group, because I was deemed as being someone who would be unresponsive to the treatment. And I didn't think about that properly until that point. And then I thought, well, what's the point in continuing? Because I'm just someone who's there as a human guinea pig for them to see what kind of response there is for a tumor that doesn't respond to these treatments.
That was exactly my position as well. I was exactly the same. Going through all these different cycles of treatment, and it's not responding. They decide to just keep going anyway because they just want to see what happens.
Yeah, this is actually the trial that I was a part of is called the Catnon trial. And so, you can look it up. It's not just me giving this anecdote. And it's just crazy how it with that idea of that trial, you wouldn't want to be in the control group, because it's just what was expected well, more or less happened. There was a marginal benefit, but it's not really worth the poor quality of life, and still a poor prognosis. So
yeah. I mean, you have to weigh up the quality of life as well. Some of these treatments that they give us are, like you said, like of minimal benefit, if any. Some were, I mean, the clinical trial I was in, Bendamustine, it actually did nothing towards the cancer itself, but it did give me a lot of other problems as well, like lifestyle-wise. It filled my arms with blood clots, for example, gave me fevers and all sorts of things. But they continued just to see what would happen. But the cancer itself was non-responsive, or actually it grew throughout that period. But they just like to see what's going to happen. So they started the trial, and they just keep going. So you're just along for the ride when it's standard of care. It's kind of, and I always tell people like that, you're a lab rat, basically.
And I was feeling worse during it, and I still had the enhancement on my scans. So it it just seemed like something that wasn't worthwhile. And I was just, my seizures were worse. I was feeling horrible. And it's just, there's no point to that time. My mum actually around that time was also diagnosed with a different cancer that was caused by a medication she was taking. And so I began to lose trust in the medical establishment.
Yeah. So I put myself on that, and I started researching ketogenic diets for epilepsy. I learned about oligoentogenic ketogenic diets, which I hadn't heard of before. It was this big name. And from that, I learned about why the ketogenic diet that I was on wasn't working for me. It's because I had this almost allergic response to certain foods that were traditionally ketogenic, and they ended up being mostly plant foods. So I stumbled upon being on a carnivorous ketogenic diet similar to